Hello everyone, and welcome to my grainy image of the logo of Pokemon ZA, or Z through A, or ZA. Legend ZA. This game was announced literally yesterday, so if you're watching this in the future and some of this stuff is wrong, hey, we had very little information, okay? But I do think we can determine a few things, and I want to put out my own predictions, because that's fun, and it's a good way to fill a Wednesday video slot, huh? Anyway, here we are. Earlier today, Pokemon Legends ZA, which is how I'm going to say it for the rest of this video, was announced. A Legends game set in Kalos, specifically set entirely within Lumio City. So we are not leaving Lumio City. If you haven't seen that yet, it was on the website as well as on Twitter. It's a little distressing, but at the same time, I think once we go through all this, and I put through some of my predictions, I think there is something we can do with it here. Okay, so let's just get right into it with the biggest question of all, when? So this is a Legends game, which means presumably it takes place in the past, right? Because Legends don't come from the future, really, that at least not that we know of. We don't have any time travelers. Pokemon Universe does, so I guess it could come from the future. But I am here to argue it is not. Some people have said they think it's going to be the future. I heavily disagree. So at the very beginning of the trailer, after we go past the letter segment that just says Lumio City Redevelopment Plan, we have this blueprint of some buildings, right? So what you're seeing in the top right here, the actual picture of real life, this is a architecture style from the mid to late 1800s. That time period was when a real life reconstruction in Paris was taking place. And it very much seems like, comparing these two images, that's what they're going for, right? These small windows with the fenced in balconies, with the sort of decorative window tops. I don't know what you'd call that. Some arches and that for the fancier buildings. And then, just a lot of windows stacked on top of each other, which is sort of emblematic of this time period, apparently. I'm looking all this stuff up for this video. I am not very versed in French architecture, so you're going to have to take my word for it. If you want to look it up yourself, I do believe it's Haussmann. Let me just check really quick. Okay, it's Haussmann. So Haussmann. His renovation of Paris. So if you want to look that up and see some more details, I would implore you to do so. Maybe you'll find something I did not, because I did not look very carefully at the full details, because it takes place over half a century. So what can I say? All I can say is basically what it was is Paris was full of these medieval era buildings that were really cramped together with tiny streets, and basically it was causing a lot of problems in terms of the spread of disease. And Paris, obviously, it was a growing city. They wanted to be able to move more people in, and these medieval buildings were rickety and old and couldn't house as many people as obviously these kinds of buildings can. So essentially, this guy was charged with bulldozing large sections of Paris and then rebuilding them in a different style of architecture for the sake of the city's future. So yeah, I imagine that's kind of what we're going to be going with. The city is being reconstructed, because it literally says that in the trailer. So you might be wondering at this point why there's this person in the bottom right. There's a reason. So the rest of the fashion in this particular scene of the trailer, where it shows a few people, is fairly nondescript, right? It's a coat. Wow. The other people barely even have any recognizable clothing. However, this person, people are pointing out, has a baseball cap, and that means it must be set in the modern day. So, while baseball caps only became popular fashion for just everyday people in the 80s and slightly before that, they were used by sports teams, specifically, I can't believe it, but baseball players, since the mid 1800s. At least a version of them, right? It's not exactly the same, obviously, because they didn't have like plastic and stuff. And of course, in the Pokemon world, while there are baseball players in like Unova and stuff, Pokemon training is the primary sport, right? There's so many Pokemon trainers. Like, literally every Pokemon trainer, main character boy that you start as, pretty much has some sort of brimmed hat. There's, like, obviously exceptions, but Callum, who's the male trainer from Kalos, does start with a brimmed hat. Whoops, I accidentally went backwards. My bad. So I don't think this is as big of a smoking gun that this takes place in the present day or future as people might think it is. It's essentially just a Pokemon trainer wearing a sports cap that was made at the time of like the mid 1800s to 1900s, which is when we think this game is probably going to be set, and Pokemon training is basically the main sport of the Pokemon world. So it's really not that surprising. Let's move on a little bit. So the trailer's narrative, I wanted to bring this up as well in terms of why I don't think this game is set in the future, because a lot of people were pointing to this neon section of the trailer and saying, oh look, it transitioned from the old documents into the neon thing, so clearly it's saying we're like going into the future. But I don't think that's what it's trying to say at all. Because we start with that old classic classified document, right? And then we transition into this neon section, right? And we go through the city, and then we zoom back out, and then it like fades into this old blueprint of the city again. And then we go back to the letter that says confidential, and we learn it's Lumio City, and then we get the logos and stuff. So the trailer starts and ends with this sort of classic blueprint looking architectural sketch of the map. And then in the middle, we are introduced to the modern day version of the city, which is what I'm pretty sure it's saying. So like, this is how the narrative of the trailer is essentially saying the Lumios development plan created Lumio City, this sort of like futuristic modern version, and then we're going to show you that, which is why we go back to the blueprints instead of like staying in this futuristic zone. And of course, people are going to say, well, it's clearly time travel, because people love to say that all games have time travel. And I don't think it's necessarily unfounded in this case. However, I don't think we're going to actually be switching between two different versions of Lumios, personally. I mean, if they want to do that, that's cool. I just don't think there's a lot of evidence for that. Now, the one interesting thing between these two maps that I do want to bring up, seems how we're on the subject of them, is that I overlaid them on top of each other. I mean, they fade into each other, so they're the same size and everything. And pretty much everything is exactly the same between them. So, like, wow, good planning, man. However, there is one noticeable difference, right? And that are these circles. Those are the circles in this map. You can see in the parchmenty looking map, these circles are just empty. And then in the modern version, or the blueprint neon version, all of these circles are filled. Looks like the top circle is some sort of park. The right one might be like a cafe seating place. The bottom right one, I don't know what the hell that is. The bottom left one has like a Pokemon Center, I think. And then the top left one looks like a Pokemon Stadium. So it's interesting that that is the one difference between these. And also it happens to be 5 things. And Legends Arceus had I don't remember what they were all called, but the first zone, which is like Floroma Town and Ranma's Island and all that. Is it Ranma's Island? Ramnus Island? Whatever, you know what I mean. The second area, which was the swamp. The third area, which was Mount Coronet. I definitely skipped over the coastlands, which is another area. And then the snowlands, which is a 5th area. 5 areas, 5 circles. Coincidence? I think not. I'm assuming that we're going to have these areas sectioned out, sort of, and that these 5 circles, whatever they end up being, are going to be like the important narrative zone of that area. It's just a guess, but I'm going to assume that is the case. So, what about the ultimate weapon? It's literally in the logo. Like, if you look back at it, whoops, I went the wrong way. don't think about that. We have the Z for Zygarde, and then we have A, which is, like, clearly supposed to represent the ultimate weapon. It's got, like, the petal sort of things on the bottom, just like the ultimate weapon does. So it's like Z to A, Zygarde to the ultimate weapon, basically. More evidence of time travel. I don't know about that, but yes. So clearly we're going to see the ultimate weapon, right? Well, there's a few reasons that makes me think we are not. One of them is that we're not leaving Lumio City, and the ultimate weapon, notably, is in Geosenge Town, which is like a little while away. It's also stated in the original X and Y that it had been 3,000 years since the ultimate weapon was fired off. And I don't know, I'm not great with math, but I do not think that the 1800s is 3,000 years ago from X and Y. We don't ever really know what the year is that each Pokemon game takes place. But I mean, the next game, Sun and Moon, referenced the year 95 on, like, Red's shirt, referencing back to the release date of the original Red and Blue. So we're at least somewhat contemporary. We're not, like, 2,000 years in the future compared to us in the real world. AZ was a king, so that leads into, like, the medieval thing, and it was a great war where a bunch of people in Pokemon died. Not sure Pokemon's really gonna want to make a game about you taking place in a war. I don't think it's gonna happen. However, I do think that the effects of the ultimate weapon are going to be very prevalent to this storyline, because, talking again about Hosman's renovation of the city, that was destroying medieval architecture to make way for the future. If the ultimate weapon did take place in, like, a medieval time period and AZ was a king, it's like, you know, washing away the war and all that history and covering it up with a fine veneer of modern architecture. There's definitely a story arc there. Somehow, Mega Evolution returned. I mean, it never really left. People act like Mega Evolution, we've been starved for it, but I mean, it's been in Pokemon Go for a very long time. I understand that that's not the main series game, and a lot of people are really attached to Mega Evolution for some reason. I guess because it looks cool. Like, it looks a lot cooler than Dynamax or Z-Moves or Terastallization. I almost said Crystallization. No, that was not the name of it. And I understand that, but it is completely unbalanced. And, you know, the channel's called Guilty Flygon, and they were going to give Flygon a Mega Evolution, but they couldn't decide on a design, so they just didn't. You know, maybe I'm a little bitter. Who knows? I do think there is a few Pokemon who definitely deserve to get their Mega Evolution converted into a regular evolution, though, like Sableye, Mawile, who was the other one? Kangaskhan. Even though Kangaskhan was a menace back in the day. Houndoom. Like, there are definitely Pokemon that deserve it, that got Mega Evolutions. But then you also have, like, oh yeah, Metagross needed a Mega Evolution. Yeah, oh, it was so struggling in terms of its competitive niche. Or, like, Blaziken. Wow, oh, man. And it's very funny because, like, you have Garchomp, whose Mega Evolution is just strictly worse. So, like, clearly there wasn't a lot of planning that went into Mega Evolution, and that's why we haven't seen it for a while. However, I think if they're going to quote-unquote reboot Mega Evolution in this game, go back to, like, the origins of Mega Evolution, you could kind of fix that, right? You could, like, either not bring back any of these Mega Evolutions, which I don't think is going to happen, because some of them are so iconic. Mega Lucario, Mega Absol, what's the other? Mega Gardevoir. Like, they're probably going to bring them back. But they could just, like, completely redesign them. And instead of having, like, regional forms, we have new Megas, like ancient Megas. That'd be cool. I don't think they're going to do it, though. I think we're still going to have regional forms, and the Megas are going to come back, and they'll add a couple new Megas. That said, what is Mega Evolution? Other than from a gameplay standpoint and design-wise, like I've been talking about. Mega Evolution is the residual energy from the ultimate weapon being fired off, crystallizing into these things that allow Pokemon to access superpowers, essentially, that they didn't have before. That seems pretty relevant. So while I don't think we're going to see the ultimate weapon fired, I do think we're going to see the first Mega Evolution in this game. I think Mega Evolution is going to be the new phenomenon. In the same way we had Nobles in Legends Arceus, I think rampaging Mega Pokemon make a lot of sense. Because if you read some Mega Pokemon Pokedex entries, they're like in terrible pain, and they're like... mind is clouded with rage or something. Like, there's some pretty dark ones out there. So the idea that accidentally accessing Mega Evolution is able to drive these Pokemon crazy makes a lot of sense. Now, the only kind of problem with that is that Mega Evolution's supposed to activate specifically when, like, oh, the bond between a Pokemon and its trainer is strong. So you have, like, the Keystone and then the Mega Stone, and it goes like, you know, and then you Mega Evolve. I do think there's the possibility that they might either just be like, what? No, that was never a thing. Pokemon can just Mega Evolve if they're too close to these stones. Or they will say that the energy is a lot stronger because these Mega Stones are just being uncovered. And so even just contact with one is going to force a Pokemon to Mega Evolve. And maybe, like, the way they'll spin it is like, okay, these are Mega Evolved Pokemon, but they aren't able to be in control of their power, and, like, their power isn't able to be properly maintained within their body unless there's a connection to a trainer. So that way, like, when you're using Mega Evolution, you're not torturing your Pokemon, but Mega Evolution can be a torturous thing still, where we need to save the Pokemon from it, essentially. And it makes a lot of sense that these stones might be dug up because we're destroying a bunch of things that existed during the medieval times, bulldozing them. Naturally, some stuff from that time is going to sort of re-emerge. So I like this a lot. I think that's what they're going to do, and I'm actually quite happy with that in terms of not just doing the same thing again, but also it's a great way to introduce new Megas. It feels like that's what they're going to do, and I'm happy about that. So, the major players, and this is my final slide. I just want to talk about some people who I think are definitely going to come back from the Kalos games and have, like, a ancestor in the same way we saw in Legends Arceus. Obviously, we're probably going to see all the gym leaders, but I wanted to make specific note of these people in particular, because it seemed like, I mean, this is technically Pokemon Z, it seemed like they were going to do something more with at least a few of these characters in a Pokemon Z that never happened, that they might now be adapting for this game in a different way. So let's start from left and go to the right. So on the far left is this character named Alexis. I think that's her name, Alexis? Something like that. Alexa? She's the first gym leader's sister, older sister, who was, like, really featured in the anime. I remember that, because I was barely watching the XY anime back in the day, but even I remember she was, like, in a lot of episodes of the anime at a certain point, and she barely did anything in the game. All she did was, like, give you the experience share in the first town, and then disappear off to her newsroom in Lumio City. Oh, Lumio City, crazy, funny about that. I do think her ancestor will probably be far more important. If the plot of this game is essentially that you are tasked with keeping the streets safe because of this, like, Mega Evolution scourge that's happening because they're tearing up the land to put these new houses down, then I think it would make a lot of sense if there was, like, a news lady or newsman, depends on where they want to go with her, who is, like, dogging you down, or dogging down who I think is probably going to be in charge of you, but we'll get there in a second. Malva. So this is the lady with the red glasses. She's, like, the only Elite Four member in Kalos that has a backstory. Like, okay, you have Drasna, who's, like, an old dragon lady, maybe related to the Draconids from Hoenn, I think. There might have been something like that. That's, like, I don't know if that's true, but I seem to remember something like that. You have Seabold, who's just, like, a cook, who has, like, a cool line, but not much else to him. And then you have Wickstrom, who's a knight, but, again, not much else to him. Malva is implied to be a member of Team Flare, and she's also a news reporter. So she's got like way more going on than anybody else. She's part of the evil team. So given that, I mean, we're definitely going to see Lysander in this game. She's probably going to be working for him in some way or another. And I should really just talk about Lysander because none of this makes sense until I do. I think Lysander's going to be the mayor. Or like Lysander's ancestor is going to be the mayor. Because in the same way we had like the Galaxy Corps and we were working for them, and Silene, who is Cyrus basically, was like the leader of that. Kind of. I mean, technically it was Rowan, but she was in charge of us, right? I feel like Lysander, the guy who was always... I think it would be ironic, right? Because Lysander's whole stated mission was like to preserve beauty or whatever. The beauty of people. So I think it would be interesting if the plot is essentially he is destroying what he sees as ugly to replace it with something beautiful. This new version of Lumios that lives up to his standards. That makes a lot of sense. I think he's going to be the mayor, or he's going to be at least in charge of the construction. Mayor just seems right to me because it's like the highest position of power that you can have within a single city. And it also adds the potential that someone could be running against him, like he could have a political rival, which is where I think Diantha might fit in. Diantha and Lysander are always kind of positioned in the story of X and Y as opposites. Like, Lysander is trying to court Diantha to essentially be on his page, where he's like, oh, but you're an actress. Surely you understand that, like, when your beauty fades, then what will happen to you? And Diantha says something along the lines of, well, I hope I can find different roles at that time then to explore who I really am at that point. Instead of like, oh, I want to be beautiful forever. Of course, they could swap those motivations. But I do think it would be interesting if Diantha was running against Lysander as like a political opponent. And she's positioned as like the villain of the game, right? Because essentially like, oh, Lysander's your boss, and she's like trying to stop you from doing all this stuff that's making the city better. And then it's sort of revealed that in fact Lysander is evil the whole time, and Diantha was in the right. And that might seem really straightforward, but it's kind of a double bluff, right? Because in Legends Arceus, we made Team Galactic the good guys, and then, you know, Cynthia, the champion's ancestor anyway, which is Volo, the bad guy. So it'd be funny if we positioned it in the exact same way, where we start with Lysander, and Lysander's a good guy now. Oh, okay. Yeah, I get it. It's just like Legends. And then we reveal, actually, no, he's still evil. If I wanted to go the most crazy out there thing, in the same way that, like, Ingo was time displaced in Legends Arceus, it would be so funny if it was just Lysander. Like, Lysander doesn't have an ancestor in this game, or maybe he does, but he's, like, working with them, and he just got, like, transported back in time before he got obliterated or whatever, by the ultimate weapon. I think that'd be so funny. It's just, like, literally Lysander, and he's trying to do the exact same plot, except this time we actually give him some character, maybe? Thanks, guys. Okay, back to the left now that we've talked about that. Professor Sycamore. I mean, obviously he's going to be here. I don't know if he's going to be the Pokemon professor. Maybe he's Lysander's political rival. I don't know. But he's going to be here in some way. And they're definitely going to turn him into a girl. That's kind of a given. Like, Sycamore is known as, like, the hot professor. Before Kukui came out, I guess. Huh. Anyway, so they're definitely going to cash in on that, is all I'm saying, in terms of, you know, marketability. So I don't really know what Sycamore's going to do. He might just be the professor. He's studying starter Pokemon or something. His ancestor is. But he's definitely going to be here. I mean, he lives in Lumio City even, right? Tierno Trevor, I think that's his name, and Shauna. They're probably going to be here in some role. I think it'd be fun if Shauna was like your rival in this game, but probably not all that interesting. Maybe these are just like the other members of the whatever safety squad that are trying to stop the Mega Pokemon from going crazy. Sure. I mean, it's another case where I'm like, they're probably going to be here, but I don't know what they're going to do with them. So, I don't know. I'll put them here. Karina is very interesting. So that's the roller skating lady. She was a gym leader in X and Y. She was also the person that introduced you to Mega Evolution. And she is descended from a family line of people who were the first people to Mega Evolve a Pokemon. So, seems like that might be relevant here. Especially because we aren't going to the Tower of Mastery, which is a place in Shalor City in X and Y, where you go to essentially learn the history of Mega Evolution, and then you get your Mega Ring. That said, it might just be how we learn about Mega Evolution. Might not be anything too serious, but I mean, Karina's ancestor being the main villain who wants to, like, Mega Evolve these Pokemon into, like, weapons of war or something. It's a possibility. I don't know. And finally, Clement. So Clement is the Lumio City gym leader in X and Y, and also he played a big part in the anime. He didn't really have that much of a presence in X and Y, though, which I think is a little funny. However, there is something that's a little weird, right? So Clement's got this, these, like, you can see it. He's got, like, an Apom arm coming out of his backpack and, like, a Heliolisk satellite scanner. Lysander has very similar tech on him. And, like, no direct connection is ever brought between the two of them. And I don't think there really is one, but it would be interesting if Clement's ancestor, this, like, reclusive inventor back in the day, has some direct connection with Lysander, or Lysander's ancestor, you know what I mean, and is like trading stuff with him that is helping him become more powerful. It's interesting. Anyway, it's something that I've always thought was weird, that was never explained, and they could do it at this point. I think it'd be very fun if Clement was your rival, personally. Although I would also enjoy it if Karina's ancestor was your rival, or Sycamore's ancestor was your rival. Really, there's so many different directions you could take these characters, because a lot of them don't have very much characteristics. Like, you can really just do whatever you want, other than Lysander wants to preserve beauty, and Diantha opposes that. There's really not a lot of other solid character arcs in this game. So you can go a lot of places, and I'm excited to see it. All right, I'm excited to see it. But that's the end of this video. So thanks for watching. These are my thoughts on Pokemon ZA. Oh, I'm sure AZ will show up too, because we're gonna get Eternal Floette. But I feel like his role in the story is kind of obvious, right? He's like, oh, the ultimate weapon caused the Mega Stones to do this thing. And then obviously Zygarde's gonna show up, but I mean, the city is tearing up all this stuff and setting Pokemon off on Mega Evolution rampages. Kind of makes sense that the Order, God of Order, basically, which is what Zygarde is, natural order, would take problem with that. Okay, yeah, now I'm actually done. Like the video, subscribe, comment below what you think will happen in ZA in terms of plot, predictions, and anything else you want, really. Go crazy. All right, I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.